An ongoing trade dispute between the U.S. and China plagued much of the Trump administration, also with military exercises in the South China Sea and questions about who should be held accountable for the outbreak of COVID-19. The Biden administration will have many important foreign policy decisions to make. So what can we expect to happen after the inauguration when it comes to relations between Washington and Beijing?
On the one hand, it's difficult to tell.
This is James Carafano, the Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation.
You can't really listen to what people say on the campaign trail. It doesn't really tell you very much. If you went back, for example, to Obama and McCain, they sounded identical on the campaign trail. I used to give people different quotes and say, who said this? And you couldn't tell. And in retrospect, if you look at Obama's campaign rhetoric from the first election and what he actually did in foreign policy, they don't look alike at all. We do know, for example, if Biden were president, we have a lot of people who he's named who were part of the Obama foreign policy team. Well, on the one hand, that's not very encouraging. Obama had a terrible track record on foreign policy. Really didn't do anything to substantially deal with China, so that's not very encouraging. On the other hand, 4 years have gone by, so you just can't go back to Obama policies, and so you would wonder, hey, are they going to do things differently? The other big variable in the China relationship is, unlike we say this is the era of great power competition, but unlike dealing with North Korea or Iran or Russia, China has a lot of cards to play, and a lot of this will depend on how China wants to pursue the relationship with the United States. So the president, it's not like the president gets a free hand. They say the enemy gets a vote. Certainly the Chinese will get a vote. What are the top issues? Well, if you look at the top issues, we're actually in a pretty good place now. And it might say, well, regardless of who's president in January, the answer is just keep doing what you're doing. So South China Sea is a good example. For the first time in really over a decade, the U.S. has been very, very aggressive in pressing freedom of navigation, and in countries that have territorial maritime disputes with China, we very much picked a side. We no longer sit back and say, well, this is between you guys. So the U.S. position in South China Sea is extremely well staked out. To back off any of that would really be a step back.
I was going to ask you exactly on the military front, too. I think that a lot of people don't really grasp just how many resources the Chinese have and how large their military could be if they wanted to expand it beyond the levels of today. I mean, what sort of future threats does the United States face? And you talk about the position that the incoming administration is in come January. And there has been this sort of shift in a more pressure campaign on China, similar to what we've seen with the Iranian regime, but different in the sense that a lot of the focus had to do with the trading relationship.
Right. So in the military relationship, you have to look at the Chinese threat in the many dimensions, because we don't fight on land, we don't fight on the sea, we don't fight in the air, we fight in all these places simultaneously. Nobody understands this more than the Chinese, and they've been very aggressive in expanding their capabilities to operate in space and to deny other people access to space, in cyberspace, in their naval forces, in their strategic forces, which almost nobody talks about. The difference still between the Chinese and the United States is the Chinese are still not really an expeditionary military. Most of their power projection is really is projecting power in the region. But the United States is a global power with global interests and global responsibilities, and we still have to operate in the Atlantic, in the Pacific, and other places. And so the last 4 years, as opposed to the Obama years, instead of pulling money out of the military, we've been putting money into the military. And that has really enabled us to make investments across the board. We buy more submarines. We built a space force. We're buying F-35s at an unprecedented rate. We're buying more ships. If we stop or slow down that, essentially that shrinks the advantage between the United States and China, and that's a greatly troubling concern. The other issue that has military implications is the Chinese are really seeking kind of waypoints around the world. So they're looking for places where they could potentially operate out of in Africa, in Latin America, in the Atlantic, in Europe. That's not a military competition, but it's competition where the Chinese are looking to make investments and own ports and different facilities, which over time could turn into a military concern, a place they essentially could take their forces to. So competing with China in the Western Pacific, what's often called the Second Island Chain, in Latin America, in Africa, this is really, really important as well. There's almost no aspect of the competition where I'd say it's actually safe for the United States to say, oh, let's just pull back. You know, and this is, to me, I think is what's very concerning is when people talk about, well, let's find common ground with the Chinese. Well, the Chinese have no interest in looking for common ground. They're looking for advantage. And so anything that you might do to placate the Chinese, that would essentially be a signal that we're going back to the old U.S. policy, which is we're not going to push back on you as you expand your interest at the expense of our interest. I think that's incredibly dangerous.
You've been listening to James Carafano, the Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation.
Thanks for watching the Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. With more than 500,000 members, we are the nation's largest conservative research and education institution. We believe the principles and ideas of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing. Please help us further our mission by subscribing to this channel and sharing our videos with your family and friends.